One of the things you might have noticed lately is that I've made several references to the idea that it's a great time to be alive. Whether it's one of my kids posting it on our family page or me just saying it's a great time to be alive. But lest I sound trite, we're going to start down another road. We're going to start off on we're going to go places. We've been places recently where nobody's ever gone before, but we're going to take that to another entire level. And I'm going to make it worth it for you. You will. There's nobody on the planet. And I do mean that when I say there is nobody on the planet having gone, has gone, nobody exploring the areas that we're going to explore. And I'm going to set this up quickly and let you know. But first, let me explain something. In the early 90s, I started hanging around with bench rest people and hearing about the PPC and blah, blah, blah. And, listening to people argue and grunt back and forth because they didn't know any better. But sometime in the 90s, I was actually introduced to a series of cartridges that not only changed my life, they had changed the accuracy paradigm on the planet. Accuracy was pretty stagnated for 50 years, 20 years, 30 years. And these two guys set out to change accuracy, to come up with something actually better. And we are going to call that, I'm going to coin a name for it here. I'm going to call this PPC accuracy. To this day, most people don't know what that means, but I need to tell you, it's a thing. In the 90s, I ran across an estate auction, an estate sale where they had, probably a dozen guns, a bunch of reloading gear, just an older man's lifetime accumulation of accuracy stuff. He was not a bench rest shooter, but he was a lifetime aficionado of accuracy. I never met him, so I don't know. But anyway, I met the kids. Gist of it is, this estate sale had 3 PPCs in it. PPC was something I'd heard of before. I went up, I made him an offer outside of they're auctioning off all this guy's possessions, and I said, hey, if you can come up with a number, I'll make you an offer on all of the shooting stuff. You'll never get this. I'm in the odd position of starting down this road, having money available to start down a road that I've been wanting to for a long time. Well, bottom line is the deal went through and I ended up with 3 6 PPC USA rifles. Now, understand that at this time I was a good rifle builder. I could take a Remington 700 and a fat barrel, and I had built, and I knew all the rules, and I could plate the bottom, and I could make it a single shot, and I could make a rifle that would shoot better than I could. Better than. Well, here this thing came up, and I ran across these 3 6 PPC. They were actually, once I got them, something called the 6 PPC USA. I didn't know the difference. All I knew is that I had a Ruger number 1 that shot a cartridge called the PPC. I had a Ruger M77 varmint with a laminated stock and a big old heavy barrel, and it shot. And I also had a Socko A1 BR version single shot. And I had seen one of those perform before. We had a guy that used to come into my gun shop that brought in target after target, one whole group. He had a range out his window and blah, blah, blah. So I thought I was onto something, and it's true that these 3 rifles all shot well. And of the 3, I'll just state unequivocally that the Socko was the more accurate. Now I had cases of 4 different iterations at that time. I had large primer pocket cases, large primer pocket, large flash hole, and small flash hole. I don't know how he got a hold of those. I think he might have made them. They were converted in military somehow or another. Oh, had a whole bunch of these cases, had a whole bunch of stuff. I spent 2 or 3 years just wringing these 3 guns out, and I thought I was really going somewhere, but I was never getting the stuff I was reading about. By now I'm a member of the IBS, and I'm getting the magazine, and I'm looking. So I've got these 3 guns and a whole bunch of brass, and I started taking notes, and I started noticing things about the big primers and the small primers. I started noticing that there were certain characteristics of certain cases, but in no case would these cases run the velocities that the bench rest guys were running. So I kept looking and looking and looking. At this time I was really wrapped up in case dimensions and barrel lengths and all the stuff that was being talked about everywhere, that the PPC was the perfect cartridge case. So, bottom line is, when it all got said and done, I believed the books, I believed the stories, I believed the magazine articles, and I said, okay, for whatever reason, these are accurate. These are very, very accurate rifles. But they don't shoot with the so-called PPC. So, I turned around, I started calling gunsmiths across the nation, and I find a guy, I won't mention him because he's just too nice a guy to be associated with me. But he built me, just to cut to the chase, a do-all rifle that I could use as a test platform to find out. I got a bench rest grade action, an HBR stock that I could convert, had a plate on the bottom so I could convert it to something else, and a whole pile of barrels. I had a 22 BR and a 6 BR and a 6 PPC, a real one, and a 6 PPC heavily fluted and lightened up, again a real one, a 308, a 243 Ackley. I ended up with 243 Ackley improves. When this was all said and done, we bought 2 of these guns, had about 4 243 Ackley improved barrels for competition, out to 1,000. This is the do-all rifle. I wanted something I could do everything with. But what it did allow me to do is, for 2 or 3 or 4 years, I shot all these barrels head to head with each other, and my buddy shot head to head, and we varminted and we shooted, and I had a range at my house, and I kept notes, and I shot thousands of rounds. And one of the things I learned was that the 243 Ackley project would never compete at 1,000 yards. It was competitive at the time. At the time, there was rifle accuracy at 1,000 yards was contracted and written and put together by Dave Brandon. And in that book, if I remember right, the 308 Bear kind of ruled the roost. But the 6MMs were starting to make inroads, and some of the guys were making big 6mm bullets, which were 105 to 107 to 108 grain. A lot of strides going on. And just as that book came out, the 243 Ackley started making inroads. And by the time I had the book in my hands, the Ackley was ruling the roost. It was the 243 AI was the hot rod. Hard on brass, but they had perfected the 6mm bullets. Long story short, they applied PPC ideas to this thing, and it responded. But one of the things that was becoming apparent is that the fight went on and on and on and on and on about the case dimensions and the sizes and the magic and the fact that we're using a Russian case to make the most accurate American gun in the world, and it's making everybody mad. During that time they designed, Jim Steckel pushed and shot and fought something called the 6BR, which was based on you'll have to look up a lot of the, I don't want to give you a history lesson, but suffice it to say that the BR was the only thing that ran close to the 6PPC. But it was becoming more and more apparent that the hinge point was pressure. The PPC ran at such high pressures that it didn't even get talked about. In the loading manuals, a PPC would go up to 2,900 feet per second, and out on the range, people were shooting them at 3,250 up to 3,350. And that's not in any book. And the thing shouldn't do that. That's basically, those velocities were keeping up with cases that were twice that size. The pressure thing was starting. Ayler had come out with something called the 43, which had pressure gauges on it. It was a chronograph. People were starting to shoot with chronographs. And more folks were realizing that it's about pressure. The whole paradigm changes at 80,000 psi. At 80,000, well, at 70,000 psi, we start to see PPC accuracy. This thing starts to come alive. Prior to this, the biggest, baddest hot rods were running up to 65,000. Most ran. And these are all things that normal people can't measure, but they were making stuff to where normal people could measure it. And over, different disciplines and different things were showing that PSI, high pressure systems, are the harbinger of good accuracy, tunable accuracy. And by tunable, I mean that every gun, when it's fired from a 22 to a 50 BMG, I mean literally from a 22 rimfire, the 22 rimfire world is filled with people who are dealing with the accuracy. Disturbance, I don't know what else to call it. Basically they're dealing with vibrations and the fact that even the small impulse of a 22 screws up the vibrations. So, 22s are getting pretty accurate. The PPZ is resetting the sights of the entire world. And everything else still managed to stagnate. Now here it is. We're now in 2023. We've come a long, long way as slowly, and I mean reluctantly and slowly, like two dogs entering the room and spending 4 hours clawing the floor up and biting each other to finally come together. But what is happening is the PPC paradigm is starting to carry over. And while I've got these numbers up here, let me just state that winning PPCs increase this number to 80,000 PSI. It's pretty much been known in the... Now, the shooting world has been really screwed up for about 3 years right now because the sheeple in the world, the voting public, all the stupid people caved into this COVID nightmare. And just as we were starting to see some changes and come of age with some of this stuff, everything came ground down to a halt as various match directors tried to let people shoot and tried to still conform to the communist rules, and it was a sick thing. I remember I quit shooting in 2020 because the match director for my 600-yard stuff, which is where this becomes relevant, decided, maybe I've said too much, let's just say that there were people in the industry who decided that they really wanted to shoot, way down in their belly buttons they wanted to shoot, but they really wanted to not break the law, so they decided that it was safer and better, and it was an acceptable alternative, to go ahead and shoot 600 yards without your safety glasses, but instead wearing a mask. The mask was more important than the safety glasses because you can't do both. You can't go out on a cold morning with a mask on and shoot because it fogs up your safety glasses. So the decision was made, and I was told when I was going to go to a match that I said, "What are you doing about masks?" I said, "Oh, we're wearing them. What are you doing about fogging?" "Well, we have made a special rule to where we'll allow you to not wear your safety glasses." And I threw my hands up in the air and swore a massive oath and said, "I will never support this line of thought. I will never support this anti-American sentiment. Any idiot who will allow you to throw your safety glasses aside so you can wear a mask at the behest of our freaking, in our case, it was the governor. That just doesn't work for me. So, bottom, really what happened is that 600 and 1,000-yard shooting, for the most part, if it didn't grind to a halt, it definitely slowed way down in its various places. So just as they were starting to come to grips with this crossover, the PPC into the 600 and 1,000-yard range, and interestingly enough, in 2019, there was a change in the shooting world that just rocked my whole status quo. In my opinion, the 70,000 PSI, as shown us by the PPC, is important. This is the single most important thing in the accuracy paradigm. Now that's a big statement. That's a monster statement, but you have to understand the paradigm, the rules, everything changes when you hit that 70,000, 80,000 PSI. Your burn rate. Certain powders respond well to running right at the, most powders respond well to running way at the top of their burning envelope. Consistency. Consistency flattens out, and consistency is the key to everything accuracy related. An argument can be made that we need the vibrations, the overriding vibrations running down the barrel and the little vibrations pecking at it so that we can get an effective, consistent bullet release every round. And tagged onto that comes something called extreme spread, which we've been talking about. Basically, this change in the shooting world was so big that even though I've never mentioned it before, and I'd never even started to explore it because I knew it was a huge subject. It's part of the reason I started this YouTube channel, is to test this earth-shattering kaboom, this earth-shaking change, this an item hove over the horizon that looked like it was going to allow us to run 1,000-yard cartridges, more like the PPC. Because here's the real problem. They don't make cases. The PPC, the BR, and all of the variants of that run this high pressure because of a certain set of characteristics that they all exhibit. It's not magic. It's not case design. It's not any of the things that people have been struggling trying to figure out all this time. It is quite simply that for true high-end accuracy, you must get the operating pressures up high. And this was not as apparent in the early 80s as it got, as time went on and the PPC found its footing. So many things were coined only to address the specificity of the PPC. The phrase "tip the powder can" came up. I mean, it originated, and to this day, it was standard with a PPC round. You go out, things get a little bit doggy. You're shooting it, starting your day at 3250. And at some point, something changes, and the only way hot rodders know how to go is up until she blows. So you tip the powder can. I went up a few clicks. I went up a few clicks and my mag tightened up and I wrecked my cases. I went up so high that I wrecked my cases. But I won, so who cares? I'll make new cases every match. And we started getting primer pocket restoring tools and small base dies and a whole bunch of stuff to accommodate that tendency to tip the powder can. Because the bottom line is, it didn't matter what the cost was. It didn't matter if you had to bring extra cases. It didn't matter if you had to shoot a match. To this day, I'd say a huge percentage of the people out there go to a match, shoot their way through it, and at the end they literally throw their cases in the garbage. It's not the cost of the cases, by the way, that bothers you. It's the time that you spent in making them and getting them to shoot. And knowing, you don't know if you've got one in there or 5 in there that have got ruptures or split necks or wrinkles in the shoulders, or, you know, a case needs to be fired. Anyway, there's a whole downside to that. But because we need to get up in this 70,000 to 80,000 PSI range, it's worth it. Well, 2019, a change occurred. And we're going to spend a while, however long it takes, explaining and testing and bringing in the item that I really think will change the accuracy world regarding 600 and 1,000 yard shooting. I think this is, among other things, but this change is going to allow me to test some things. And it definitely won't be a fail, but if this case is sending out factory rounds at PPC pressures, 80,000 PSI, that's a place for me to start. So I'm giving you these hints to let you play along between this video and the next. Next video we're going to introduce what it is that I'm going for. But I almost feel like the last 3 years have been set up for this experiment that we're going to do now. This is going to be a big one, guys. This is going to bring us places and show us things. And trust me, it's not a known thing. I'm talking out my butt here. I don't have anything yet, but I have a plan. And man, give me a plan and a pace to stand, and I'll move the world. So we'll start working our way in. This is just my introduction video to the new paradigm in long-range accuracy.